Welcome back to Bexhill West. In today's video, as promised, we're going to have an overlook at the model as it stands now. I'll give you an update on what I've been working on, and I'll talk through some of the design decisions that I've made in putting this together. Hi, I'm James. Today we're going to have a look at the model as it currently stands. I'll show you some of my progress. I'll talk about some of the bits that have kind of stalled, and I'll explain why they've stalled or why I'm pausing with them for the time being. We'll have a look at we'll do a recap of the overall plan for the benefit of new subscribers who maybe haven't seen some of my previous videos. And we'll look at some of the construction techniques I've used. Let's begin. So let's begin by returning to this model of my model, and for the benefit of those who haven't been following along with this journey and for whom this is all new, my model has been built into separate boards. Now these boards, these little modules, I've made them as big as I can comfortably lift and shift around by myself. So ideally they would be in bigger sections, but I've made them this size so they're portable. And this shows the track plan at Bexhill West, which was a terminus station with two platforms. Now the main lines, the gradients and the radius of the curve through the platforms, this is all exactly to scale, and the length of the platforms, everything has been taken from the original gradient plan for the line. So everything sort of here is perfect. Now these lines form the head shunt for the goods yard, which would be off screen sort of at 5 o'clock. And what I've had to do in order to fit this onto the board, I've had to kind of cheat a little bit, and this head shunt would actually be in reality sort of over where the edge of the board is, and it would sort of run off here slightly. So this grassy area between the head shunt and the station runaround loop here would have been much bigger. I've compressed it to fit on the board, and that's a compromise I've had to make. However, there aren't many photographs taken of this particular line, this head shunt, so I think I can get away with it. But it's, you know, it's just one of those necessary evils, really. But anyway, that's the basic plan. We've got a terminus station building at the end, two platform structures, so there were platform 1, platform 2, this side was platform 3, and what would have been platform 4 never had a track running around it. And in fact, this whole platform here was overgrown for much of the life of the railway, and we'll talk about how I might represent that shortly. So that's the overall view. Let's get into looking at the model. So let's begin our tour by starting with the station building, and first of all mentioning its board. Now if we have a look, if I spin the camera around, you'll see that the board is not even full size. In fact, this board is a legacy of when I started the project, and the whole thing was going to be a maximum of 900mm wide, so this was a kind of a spare board. Now I said a few weeks ago that I'd hoped that by Christmas I'd have this end all done, and that was the plan. However, I've since been giving it a bit more thought, and part of the reason is the building itself. Now when the railway was dismantled, the building remained, and it's still there, and it's still a wonderful building. It's now a sort of an antique shop. But immediately after the demise of the railway, it served as a headquarters for the local civil defence organisation. And amongst other things that were stored there were a number of these things, which some of you may recognise as a Green Goddess fire engine, or a Bedford RLHZ to get nerdy about it. Now, one of the interesting things about this is, and it's not really known to viewers of this channel, is that I actually own one of these, and I don't mean this little one in my hand. I've got a full-size one, and I'm quite interested in that particular piece of history. So it occurred to me that I could make this end of the railway sort of detachable, and it be a standalone diorama in its own right. You see, if you own a fire engine such as this, you'll find regularly at birthdays and at Christmas people give you one of these little matchbox models as a gift. So I've got quite a number of these, and if you're into your auxiliary fire service history, you'll know that once you've got 6, you've got enough for a column. So My plan is, in addition to this serving as the railway, I'll be able to also use the building as a kind of like a little auxiliary fire service diorama. And I'm really keen to make one of the vehicles that the AFS had, which was called, a rather charming name, it's called a bikini unit. Now, these guys did have some, I'm not sure what the word is, some purpose in real life. They weren't just a kind of a standby defence force. In that, I forget the year, I'll look it up, and if I can find out, I'll put it on the screen. There was actually a shipwreck off of Norman's Bay near Bexhill, and it's my understanding that the Bexhill Corps of the Auxiliary Fire Service went and dealt with this big steamer which had sort of run aground on the beach. So this is held up whilst I think about that other bigger plan, and so when I've got that all sorted out, then I will extend this board. I don't know whether I'm just going to extend it to the full width, kind of across the width here, or I might make it slightly deeper this way to encompass the bus garage, which was on the other side of Terminus Road, which ran along here. So anyway, that's all sort of digressing really. That's the model as it currently stands, and there's a reason why this hasn't progressed. Now, this was the start of the whole project, and there's a reason why this hasn't progressed, in that I'm still working on a couple of details, the most magnificent of which will be a beautiful clock tower that sits on top of here. Now, I've got some low resolution copies of the original drawings for this, and once the current situation with lockdown and everything is over and done with, I shall visit the local museum where they've got the originals, and I'll get some higher resolution versions, and I want to make a really good job of that. But because that sits firmly on top of the roof with a lead sort of covered pedestal underneath it, I can't run the tiling up. So really the tiling job has all held fire. Now these are just cardboard slates, and this will all be painted and hopefully look quite nice when it's finished. So whilst I can bear with the fact that I've not yet sort of got the clock tower on, it just looked a bit vacant without chimneys. So I've made some chimneys. These are not going to be the final versions. These are just balanced on here. So if any look a bit wonky in the video, that would be why. So let's lift the roof off and we can take a little look inside. With the roof detached, we can see that inside there is some detail. When I laser cut the parts for the walls, I incorporated the panelling on the walls and some of the door frames and bits and pieces. This will all be painted up and decorated so that I can lift the roof off when the model's complete and put a camera in here, probably use my phone or something like that. In fact, let me get my phone. Here we go, so I'll be able to use my phone, drop it inside and use the lens on the back of the phone to take photographs out the windows and down the platform and what have you. So I hope that the inside will be reasonably well detailed, and there are some lovely photos online of what the inside of this looked like. So I'm hoping to try and recreate some of those images. The next thing I'll mention, and I have mentioned this before, so sorry for the repetition, but the posters on the walls are all removable. The idea being that I can sort of represent this in different eras just simply by replacing the poster boards. And these are held on with little magnets. So if I remove some of the walls, the window frames are made on separate elements, and I've incorporated magnets into here such that when this is finally fitted into place, the magnets have got sufficient strength to hold these posters on. So that's quite a nice little touch, and it works quite well, although not when you're on camera. There we go, something like that. So that's the station building. No real progress there, but I thought I'd mention or show you where I'm at with it, just really for the benefit of those who haven't seen it before. If I swing round slightly to the refreshment room, we've spoken about this recently. This still has to have its window frames fitted, and I've got quite a lot of detail that's already made and ready to go in there, but it's not painted yet, so we'll save that for a future video. The station concourse has a canopy. Let me see if I can zoom in on that. There we go, and focus. This is still in its raw laser cut state, and as we've discussed before, I'm unsure whether or not this will end up being etched brass or not, but it's there for now, just to give you an idea of how it's going to look. And this is pretty much to scale. Dimensionally, I think it's probably, if you scaled it up, it's going to be within a couple of inches in scale terms, which is nothing on the model. I'm really quite happy with that. From this angle, you can see that the roof appears to splay out rather nastily, and that's because the internal structure hasn't been fitted inside here. When the trusses and various bits and pieces are put inside, that's going to pull these wings down. They've sort of curled up. I think the glue of the gluing the tiles on has caused the material to sort of bow a bit. That structure will all go in when I organise the lighting inside of here, and I've done a little test on another piece, and that's going to pull down just fine. And there'll be a barge board around the front, and the rainwater goods will go on there as well. Now, between the station building and the refreshment room, there's quite a nice little canopy here, and that's all been drawn up and designed on the computer. I haven't cut it out yet, and that won't get done until I finalise my arrangements for this sort of baseboard, and then this will become permanently fixed in place, and then the structure will sit on top of that. So from this position, you can sort of see down the station concourse. This area here ran into what's like a car park, and depending on what year the station, what period I'm representing, there were various other buildings that would have appeared in the immediate foreground here, and those will all be modelled, and I'll make those sort of swappable so that I could represent sort of 1902 right through to the late 60s. If I swing the camera around, we can see on the end of the refreshment room there was the ladies and gentlemen's toilets and the porters and the lamp room, and this is still a work in progress. You could see the difference in finish. I experimented with a different method of doing brickwork here, and it really didn't turn out very well, so this has just had another coat of brick red paint, and that's yet to have this sort of treatment. This isn't the final finish here, by the way. There's a sort of a couple more steps of weathering that are going to go onto here, but you get the idea. Now, the roof structure on here will be removable so that I can work inside. And something, I'll see if I can zoom in. In fact, I can't zoom in with this lens, but somebody mentioned in a previous video that this brick wall here appeared to be rather high and unsupported, and relatively weak. At the ends here and back here, where this wall returned on the end of the refreshment room, there was kind of like a Dutch gable arrangement which would have provided the support for that long wall. So I've got the Dutch gable in. I need to put the mortar work on and some capping stones, but again, you get the idea. Moving on, we can see a vacant area of board here. Now this will be dealt with once I've made a decision around that end board. Once that's all done, this will be finished off, and I think, as I've mentioned, there were different buildings there over time, but I think the main one will be a large garage with a curved roof that stood there for quite a while, and I'm looking forward to making that, but that's on hold till that next board is done, which will probably be in a couple of weeks' time. So moving round, we could see the loading dock. I mentioned previously that I didn't know what the surface of this was, and I've sort of done a kind of cobbled effect, and it was my first attempt at doing such a thing, and I don't know if it's realistic or any good. What I wanted to do was try and just build texture into this thing. I anticipate that when I finish, I want to take a load of photographs, and I'd like those photographs to be in black and white. And it occurs to me, although I'm absolutely no expert, that the more texture I get on the model, the more opportunity there is to cast shadows and things like that, and give some variety and detail to the pictures. But this will be covered in straw and horse droppings and things, and I visualise Victorian wagons and carriages and things being on here in the fullness of time. If I just adjust the camera, Can I zoom in a little bit? We can see number 2 signal box, which was located at the end of the platforms, between the 2 platforms. That, as I've mentioned before, I made some errors with that, so that's going to be rebuilt. It's all redesigned, I just haven't got round to making the parts, and I must get on with it because I promised a friend of the channel that I'd make him a kit, which is definitely going to happen. I just haven't got round to that because I've been busy with other bits and pieces. But something I'll just draw your attention to, and hopefully you'll be able to see this, is that just here is a little tunnel that runs underneath the platforms, and this was so the point rodding that ran from that signal box could run along the side of the platform and underneath the platforms where it came out of here and continued on its way, serving the various signals and bits and pieces that it controlled. In fact, if I bring you out a little bit, you can start to see some of the rodding running along there. Now, whilst I have the camera set up in this corner of the board, I'll just talk to you briefly about the grass, this being probably one of the most obvious changes that have happened to the model recently. So I'm still working on this, and the idea is this will eventually be layered up and be really quite rough. In my last video, somebody commented that the sheep in Bexhill must be very well trained, keeping it nice and neat, and yeah, they must be, because I think those of you who watched the previous episode will have seen it was really very neat. Well, this week I've just been roughing it up a little bit. It's going to become much rougher and will eventually spill over these tracks. These tracks will become almost buried in grass, because by the time the railway reached the end of its life, that's how they ended up. But for now, this is where I'm at with the grass, and I'm really quite pleased with how it's working out. This stuff is layering up beautifully, and by the time I've got some more ground cover and flowers and bits and pieces set onto this grass, I think it's going to look hopefully quite good. And these tracks here will all be buried as they run up to the buffer stops. Here's a shot along the station platform showing the point rodding. And if I pause here for a moment and zoom in, you should be able to see here, this is the tunnel that I mentioned previously, where the point rodding came from the signal box, ran alongside the edge of the platform, and there will be some little cranks here that will take the rodding underneath the platform. Now, I haven't modelled the whole of this little opening. I've just painted it black to kind of give the impression that it runs through. And the point rodding, although it's here at the moment, it runs all the way across. This will be cut back and proper little cranks added to sell the illusion that the rodding disappears under the platforms. And so to the platform structures themselves. Now, regular viewers will know that this is all fairly temporary at the moment, and there's some reasons why that is the case, which I'll run to in just a minute. So I've decided upon the platform canopy. I know exactly how that's going to be done now. I'm just waiting to get those parts finally made, and this is sitting a little bit high at the moment. This will, in the fullness of time, drop down to a more realistic height, but for now let's just pop this off and I'll show you the support structure. This is by way of a recap, and really just for the benefit of those who haven't seen my previous videos. So the platform tops are not yet fitted. These columns obviously need to be completed and painted. The platform tops come off, and there will be wiring under here for the canopy lamps and one or two other little bits and pieces that I'm going to have built into this space under here. So I've done my best to represent the brickwork of the platform sides, and then these pieces represent the corbelling at the top of the platform walls, onto which sits sort of like the edge stones of the platform structure itself. Now, the platform structure, if you watch one of my previous videos, I think I called it Health and Safety of Station Platforms. The platforms just gently dip in towards the centre, so that stray prams and trolleys and whatever can't roll away onto the tracks. That caused a slight problem at the end of the platform here, where it transitions from sloping inwards to the middle to the flat station concourse, and I'll show you a close-up of how I've overcome that problem in just a moment. Now the platform here, this is still very much a work in progress, and I'll show you where I'm at with it. The platform structure here and on the subsequent boards is all complete. I've still got to add the mortar detail to the brickwork. And as soon as I've finished this run of point rodding stools along here, this can be fitted into place. So for now it's just sort of balancing there. Now as for the actual platform top, I'm in two minds here as to quite how to go about doing it. What I've done here is taken a piece of MDF which has been laser cut. Now the camera probably won't pick up the surface of this. I've laser cut in the detail of the edging stones, but the surface of it I've laser engraved too, and that's to represent the gravel surface. The platform on this side was paved and this one was covered in gravel. However, it was not really used and very quickly became covered in grass. So I've got a sort of come up with a plan for how I'm going to represent this. I may possibly make two platform tops, and that's the reason why these aren't fitted yet, that will clip on with magnets. So there'll be a kind of as new version with the gravel top, and then a platform top as appeared much later on in the life of the line, which will be completely overgrown. And you could see in old photographs there were piles of railway sleepers on here and brambles and all sorts of rubbish. So I'm yet to decide which way to go, whether I'll have a pristine platform here or the kind of overgrown mess that the station had at the end of its life, or this compromise between the two. But I'm steering, to be honest with you, I'm steering towards having the untidy version, because I think that will present more interesting modelling opportunities. But once I've decided on what I'm going to do there, then I'll fit the coping stones, or sorry, the corbelling brickwork to the tops of these platform sides, which will, I don't know if the camera will see at the end. Currently this is sitting a bit low, but when the correct brickwork's being done underneath, then these platform tops will sit level with the surface of the station concourse at the back here. Now again, for the benefit of anybody who's not seen any of the previous videos, and particularly my video on station platforms, I thought it's worth me just showing you here how the platform, the posts for the canopy, sit into these cross pieces of the platform structure. So if I remove the top again, hopefully this will give you a clear view down, and you can see that these brass tubes just slot into here, and these will of course eventually be glued. Now the benefit of this is, particularly once they're glued, is that they become really quite rigid. So that's going to give me a nice stable structure on which the canopy top can sit. My idea is that I can have the canopy top removable, so that I can get a camera in really close and kind of shoot as though the canopy's not there if I want to take photos of trains or whatever. Also, it's a lot less vulnerable when I'm moving the model about if it's removable. But it occurred to me that if it's removable, then it would be nice if the structure it fits to is really solid, and once these are glued in, these really will be. So the final thing to discuss with regard to the boards that we're looking at here is this area behind the station. So in the real world, a roadway came off from a gate by the end of the station and ran down here and serviced the engine shed, which was sort of be on the next board across. So this was all grass with a bit of I think it became overgrown and became a bit of a brambly bank up to the back of this platform. Now there aren't very many photographs of the station taken from this direction, so I've not got much to go on here. But I'm using foam to form this structure, and I've got that all done, ready to go in. It's just waiting on a decision on these platforms, and that will probably become the basis of a little landscaping video in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I'll look at the grass techniques and how I went about doing that whilst I show you that. So this will probably be the last time you see the bare boards here. Next time when we revisit this I think will end up being overgrown with brambles and all sorts of nonsense along here, which of course will be quite interesting to model and should start then to bring this whole scene to life. it really is all hanging on making a decision on that final board, and then I'll be able to progress and have this lot completed. Now, I'm already aware that this video has already gone on too long, and I don't want to ramble on and bore you all, so I won't show you each and every board, but we'll just have a look at this one very quickly. This is the next one that joins the one I've just shown you. This is the continuation of the station platform, and this runs onto the adjacent board which goes alongside it. Now, I just thought I'd show you this very quickly, and you could see hopefully in the foreground here the difference in grass effects that I'm working towards. So this is my base layer grass, and it's all quite neat and pristine, and then just here you should be able to see that it's much rougher, and I'm still working on this texture, and it will become a little bit rougher still. Because these sidings, this is the head shunt for the goods yard that I mentioned earlier, because these are in the wrong place, this bank is slightly different to what actually existed. But what I'm going to do is have this completely overgrown with a line of trees and shrubs and what have you dotted sort of more or less in an arc, something like so. And there'll be a couple of sort of feature trees that I can set my camera beneath and take photographs through. There's a couple of nice viewpoints across the model, so that's how this is going to develop up. This area of quite neatly trimmed grass will become rougher, but it will always be much more so sort of on the lower side below this line of shrubbery which I'm going to put in. Now, this area of grass in the middle, again, at the moment is still very neat and tidy, and I'm going to dig some of this up for the reason that running along here were several telegraph poles. Now, I want those telegraph poles to be removable. One of my objectives with this was that these boards would be easy to transport and move around, and I think the telegraph poles will be vulnerable. So to help me install those, I've come up with this little idea. So hopefully you could see that. It's a little two-part 3D print. And there's a male and a female part. So the female part is going to be dug into the ground, and that will of course all be kind of grassed over and disguised. And the ends of the telegraph poles will have the male part. Now, I hope you can see that. It's a cross section, so the idea is that that will just slide in and prevent the telegraph poles from rotating whilst hopefully holding them vertically up. And my idea is that the telegraph wires themselves will be made of an elastic. They won't be dead tight, but obviously they'll have a little bit of a sag to them. But I was conscious of the fact that if I try gluing something with any sort of tension onto the cross arms of the telegraph poles, that they might twist and turn, and it might just become a bit cumbersome to kind of assemble. Well, I'm hoping that this idea will enable me to have the telegraph poles in a separate box with the bits of elastic on, and I can pull them out and just drop them in to these little slots, and I think that will work a treat. But what I'm going to do is print some more of these off and test it on a plank of wood and just see if it works. If it doesn't, then I could just drill through here and glue them in permanently. But if this works, then I think that will be a nice way of having the telegraph wires sort of removable. Now, over at the back you can see my engine shed, which was one of the projects which originally kicked this off, and it's still not finished because that itself needs to be set into a landscape. Now, it's too close to these rails, it's not going to sit on this board. I'm going to have to commit to building another board which will sit on the other side. So once I've got that board done, then that can sit into its own little landscape, and it hopefully will look a bit more presentable. But whilst I'm making the board for that, it enables me an opportunity to incorporate another feature at Bexhill West, and I'll finish the video by briefly discussing that. So I'd like to finish today's video by showing you the fruits of this week's labours. You see, the additional board that I will make to hold the engine shed will also enable me to incorporate the turntable. Now, Bexhill West had a 54-foot diameter turntable, and this is my first little mock-up of what that might look like. Now, it's not finished yet, it's still very much a prototype, a work in progress, but I'll show you sort of where we're at with this. So there's I don't know how to show you, there we go. It's a laser cut MDF construction. I've 3D printed some ironwork detail for the sides, and the, don't know what you call those, the sideboards, the side deck is just again laser cut MDF, and that is the bridge for the turntable. Now the well for the turntable, I've not decided quite how I'm going to make that yet. That probably, I'll be able to turn something on the lathe, and I may even make a mould, and it occurs to me that I might produce the well as a fiberglass moulding, and which probably seems like a lot of work and a lot of effort, but there's lots of reasons why I think that might be a good idea. So anyway, there you go. That's with the failed E1 locomotive from last time, but that gives you an idea of where I'm going with this. And I want to be certain of the design of the turntable, so that when I design the additional board which will take this and the engine shed, I need to make sure that I've got the right structure underneath the board to take the turntable. Now the turntable was only used for turning engines. It didn't run off into any kind of like roundhouse or anything like that. So this thing could be mechanised quite easily because it only has to spin through 180 degrees. And so indexing that will be quite simple to do electronically. So I'll put a little picture on the screen of my sort of first 3D CAD thoughts of how this will go. Now I know sort of roughly what's happening here with its diameters and whatever, I can get on with designing that well and design the adjacent board, which I think should all happen now when I'm off work over Christmas. I think that's enough for you. Don't you? This video's gone on far too long. I'll end it there. Now, I hope you enjoyed that look at the model in detail, and I'm sorry we didn't have time to cover all of it. The video is certainly long enough as it is, and I apologise for that. But I made the video because I had a few subscribers pestering me saying that they'd like to see the thing in its entirety a little bit more and get a sort of a bigger picture of what was going on. So I hope, if you're one of those who is interested, I hope you found that useful. Next week we'll return to a much snappier video, and I've discovered what I think might be a really novel and quite exciting way of sharing some of my 3D CAD drawings with you. So if that sort of thing's of interest and you're enjoying what you're seeing, please do consider subscribing. Really helps me out. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Cheerio.